I'm really delighted that we're being joined this evening by Rabbi Daniel Lieberman, the Chief Rabbi of the Perth Hebrew congregation and a good friend of mine, and also a boxing enthusiast. And as I'll say in a second, he'll be talking about one of his boxing heroes. To give you a little bit of background on Rabbi Lieberman, like all the best people, he's a native of Manchester. He was a youth rabbi in Manchester after studying at the very prestigious Gateshead Yeshiva in the northeast of England. He was then a senior rabbi of a synagogue in Liverpool and also a student chaplain in Liverpool. And then he moved to Perth to be the chief rabbi of the Perth Hebrew congregation in 2017. I'm going to ask him to, first of all, say a bit about himself and also a bit about Perth, how it's doing at the moment, how the shul's doing, and then to launch into his presentation about the great Jewish boxing hero and Holocaust martyr, Victor Perez. So over to you, Rabbi Lieberman, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rabbi Elton. Thank you all for having me. And we are here in Perth praying for your salvation every day from your predicament that you find yourselves in. And please God, it should end quickly. And however we can help, we will. We send our good wishes and our prayers to all of you in Sydney. First of all, a bit about me. As Rabbi Elton said, all the best people come from Manchester. And in fact, I think, although Rabbi Elton is a bit older than me, round the corner, pretty much round the corner, myself and Rabbi Elton grew up in the same area. So I'm very glad that he is your rabbi and you are used to the accent, so that I don't have to translate some of my things. Hopefully, you should be used to him by now. So a bit about me. I grew up in North Manchester. I was born in North Manchester, grew up there. And when I was young, I was very into sport. Still, I'm very into sport. I played what we call football, you call soccer. I played cricket, and I took up boxing as well because I was interested in it. In fact, my cousin, Rabbi Anthony Knopf, who's a friend of Rabbi Elton's, was the first person actually to introduce me to boxing when I was very young, because Frank Bruno was fighting Mike Tyson, and he was very excited about that. And he showed me a poster for it, and I think I was all of 8 or 9 years old, and I was fascinated by this idea of boxing. You could fight with someone and get away with it and get paid for it. How amazing! How wonderful! Be encouraged rather than be told off for fighting. So I got into boxing, and I tried it out, and I ended up being quite good at it. I used to train for boxing. I went to a boxing club, Ashton-under-Lyne Boxing Club, because the one in Salford was a bit too rough. So I went to Ashton-under-Lyne Boxing Club, trained over there, and I loved it, and I was very good at it. And then I went to Yeshiva. I studied in Gateshead Yeshiva, as Rabbi Elton said, and really not much going on over there in the way of boxing. Really, much more study of the Talmud. But once I moved to, I'd left Gateshead, I'd been to Israel for a bit, and then I went to South Africa. I got myself involved in boxing over there as well. A very prestigious boxing club led by an interesting character called Nick Durant. But the stories of him are for another day. But when I got there, I started really investigating the history of boxing and becoming very much interested in the origins of it. How does it work? What was going on? I found a huge Jewish connection to boxing, going all the way back to the 18th century of a young Jewish man from London, a man called Daniel Mendoza, who basically invented boxing. Daniel Mendoza designed the way boxing is done today, and he, Jewish man, member of the shul in London, the Sephardi shul, the Spanish and Portuguese community in London, and very, very important for the history of boxing. Also, when there was many Jews throughout American boxing, and then I came across this person called Victor Perez. But I'm going to tell you about him in a minute. I came to Perth in the end of 2017 to be the chief rabbi here. my job is very similar to Rabbi Elton's. I look after a large shul, but I have things on top of that. I look after all the baked-in matters. I look after all the kashrut matters here, and all the various civil duties to do with the government. Anything that involves government and Jewish things ends up on my desk. So I am very busy with all of that. But I'm here in Perth, and one of the things that I'm, as I said before, I'm very passionate about is sport. And I've always involved myself in sporting organizations, whether it be playing, whether it be coaching, and I've always involved myself. And I got here to Perth, and they've got a fabulous, here in Perth, we've got an absolutely great system. Our Maccabi club is really, very, very good, first class, and we've got really good facilities. And they have a martial arts center at the Maccabi club, and they've got Taekwondo and all various other Korean and Japanese martial arts. And I said to them, why isn't there a boxing club? There should be a boxing club. We should start a boxing club. And they said, yeah, well, who's going to coach? So I said, well, I will coach. I will coach. So until a few weeks ago, when I suffered an unfortunate injury playing soccer for Maccabi, and ended up with the shoulder injury, had shoulder surgery a few weeks ago. Until then, I was coaching boxing at the Maccabi Boxing Club. And done that, coached children and adults. We've coached in competitions. Some of my students have competed with distinction. We actually, in February, we hosted a boxing tournament at Maccabi, which is really, really very good, with qualifiers for the Australian Olympic team were there. It was a qualifying tournament for that. Some of the senior and the elite fighters were there. And we've done very well. And it was just started because I wanted to. And when I started it, I decided that I wanted to name our boxing club after Victor Perez, because Victor Perez is a very special person in boxing history and in Jewish history. I first came across his story when I used to give lectures on Jewish history. I used to lecture in shul, of course, for the community, but I also used to lecture in universities across the northwest of England, University of Central Lancashire, in Preston. Had a course in Jewish history. Don't ask me why. I don't think there are any Jewish students there, but it was very interesting giving Jewish history lectures to Muslim students and various other demographics. But one of the sections of the course that I did was about Jewish sports stars. Of course, Jewish people not really being, it's not a very long course, I would have thought. Jewish sports stars, you might think, although of course we have some fabulous Jewish Olympians competing both for Israel but also for Australia at the moment with a gold medal, at least one gold medal in Jewish Australian hands in the past week. But boxing, of course, being throughout its history a very Jewish sport, all the way through from Daniel Mendoza all the way to the modern day with an ordained Rabbi, Yuri Foreman, who fought last week and lost. But also former world champion Yuri Foreman. There's in recent years Dmitry Salita, Roman Greenberg, very famous and world level fighters, all being Jewish, and all the way back through the 30s in the heyday of Jewish boxing in America, with Maxie Rosenblum and all of course Max Baer, the famous Max Baer, who lost to Charles Braddock immortalized in the movie Cinderella Man. But Victor Perez is the one who stood out, and Victor Perez stood out because he was until 1978 the youngest world champion in boxing history. So think about that. The youngest world champion in boxing history was a Jewish fellow until 1978, when his title was taken from him. Victor Perez, I'll just tell you a bit about his early life. He was born in Tunisia, in Tunis, in 1911. He started training as a boxer when he was very young, in his teenage years. His older brother was a boxer as well, Benjamin Perez, although not as good. And he had beaten everybody by the time he was 14, 15, 16 years old. He'd really beaten everybody in Tunisia that he could fight against. He wasn't a very big man, by the way. He was a flyweight, flyweight range is 49 to 54 kilos. For those of you who are not au fait with the boxing world, he stood at the grand total of 155 centimeters tall, and he was a very small man. But he'd beaten everybody in his division and in other divisions as well. So when he was about 17, he decided that he's going to move to France. Of course, at the time, Tunisia is a French colony, or protectorate, I think it was at the time. But he goes off to France to fight in France, and really goes stalwart. He really explodes onto the scene, and really amazing fighter. He fought over and over again against great fighters, people who are very famous. And I've got his on my computer here. I have his box record up here. And when he moved to France, he first fought a fellow called Henri Barras in the Central Sporting Club in Paris, and he shone from the beginning. He kept on winning. He kept on knocking people out. And of course, this is a very small man. And at the age of 20 years and 7 days old, he fought also in Paris, in the Palais de Sport in Paris. He fought an American called Frankie Gennaro. Of course, his name was Frankie Gennaro. He fought a fellow called Frankie Gennaro, and he knocked him out in the second round. And he won the world flyweight title at the age of 20 years and 1 week old. And as I said, that record stood until 1978 when a Cuban, and I forget his name, took it from him. And in the end of his career, he fought all the way up till 1938. He retired in 1938, and he came back for one more fight in 1941. Incidentally, after about 10 defenses, he lost his world title to another American called Jackie Brown. And Jackie Brown was a very big fellow, and the fight, Rabbi Elton, you'll be very interested to know, was at the King's Hall, Bellevue in Manchester. And that's where he lost his title in 1932, in October 1932. And he fought Jackie Brown again for his title, and he lost again. And then he moved up to bantamweight to fight a man called Panama Al Brown, who was much bigger, about 10 inches taller than him. He's a huge man. And in fact, that's a very interesting fight, because you can see there's footage of it on YouTube. If you go on YouTube and have a look and you search for Victor Perez, the boxer, you will see some of the preparations and some of the fight that went on with Panama Al Brown in 1934 for the bantamweight title. You'll see how much bigger Panama Al Brown is, bigger than Victor Perez. Anyway, he fights all the way up to 1938. He retires in 1938. He comes back for 2 more fights at the end of his career, and he retires with a record of 139 fights. He fought 139 professional fights. He won 92 times. He lost 31 times, 32 times, and he had 15 draws at the end of his career. Now, that is not abnormal for boxers of those days. Not anymore do boxers fight so many times. I think the medical staff are very upset if they fight too many times. Current world champions. There's a current world champion at the moment, Josh Taylor, who's fought 17 times. He's a Scottish champion, a Scottish world champion, Josh Taylor, and he will probably end his career with not many more than 20 fights on his record. And Victor Perez fought 139 times. This is a change of situation. However, as well as him being a magnificent fighter, there's also a very sad end to his life and his story, because on the 21st of September 1943, he was denounced as a Jew by one of his friends. He wasn't a religious man, by the way. He was not living a religious life. He was living the life of a world champion, a boxing champion, a man about town in Paris. You can imagine what he was like. And he was denounced by a friend of his as a Jew to the Milice Française, who were, if you don't know who the Milice were the paramilitary force of the Vichy regime. Really dreadful people, led by such appalling men as Paul Touvier, the Butcher of Lyon, and really just dreadful people. And he was attacked by them. He was attacked and captured by the milice. He was rounded up, and he was sent to Drancy. He was sent to the Drancy internment camp in northern France, and he was kept there. He was kept there for the year of 1943, and towards the end of 1943, Brunner became the commandant of the Drancy camp, Alois Brunner, and he was a very, very unpleasant man. Decided that what he's going to do is he's going to deport the entire camp. He's going to liquidate Drancy and send them all to Auschwitz. And Victor Perez was sent to Auschwitz on the 7th of October 1943, and he was in transport known as Transport 60. Transport 60 was 1,000. It was the 60th transport from Drancy. There was 1,000 prisoners, 1,000 prisoners shipped to Auschwitz from Drancy, and 31 of them survived till the end of the war. Think about that. 31 people out of 1,000 survived to the end of the war. And while he was in Auschwitz, he was a fit and well man. He was a boxer. He was known. He was a famous person. So the first thing they decided to do with him is they're going to send him. They're not going to send him to Birkenau to rot and to be killed. He's useful. So they sent him to Monowitz. Now Monowitz was also known as Auschwitz III. Auschwitz III was a work camp, and he worked in the Bunnewerke, where that made rubber. It was a rubber factory, and there were some very other famous Jewish people who became famous later on, who you may have heard of, who were also working there at the same time as him. One of them, of course, was Primo Levi, who was a chemist. He had been working in chemical production before the war, and therefore he was very useful working there. Also, Elie Wiesel was at Monowitz, and that's where he stayed. He was there in the Farben plant, making rubber, and that was his job. However, the SS officers, knowing who he was, decided to use him for their despicable ends of sport, and try to they put him into sport slavery in order to amuse them, to have their own amusement, and to enjoy his suffering even more. So while he was there, we don't know how many times he fought, but it's said that he fought at least 100 times, maybe even 150 times, in the short time that he was in Monowitz camp, for the enjoyment and celebration and gratification of the SS guards. However, that didn't last till the end of his internment there, because towards the end of 1944, they decided to put one of the SS troops into a fight with him, and he knocked the fella out. And that didn't go down very well with the SS, so therefore they stopped him from fighting. But it is said that while he was fighting, they gave him extra food rations. He was given extra food rations to keep him fit, to keep him healthy, so that he was able to fight and carry on amusing these really horrible people, and so that they could use him for their amusement. So they kept him healthy. They gave him extra food. They gave him extra rations, And it is said by some of the inmates who were there with him that he would share that extra food with the other people. So you can imagine being on top of the world, a person who is literally on top of the world champion of the world, carried around on people's shoulders, adored by everybody, a celebrity. You can imagine the current sports stars of the day, and pick your sport and pick the character, and going from that to being in a slave labor camp, but still having the humanity to share your food with other people, really made him a great person. And he fought, he won, and after his fight against the SS officer, he was banned from fighting, lest he caused too much embarrassment to the Germans. So comes towards the end of the war. Of course, we know that Auschwitz itself was liberated. Auschwitz itself was liberated on 27th of January 1945, which today is marked by International Holocaust Memorial Day, which I think was instituted in 2002 or 2001. I can't remember. Maybe Rabbi Elton will know. All I can tell you is that the 27th of January is my birthday. And that's how I know. I was told from a very young age that 27th of January is a very important day. It's the day that Auschwitz was liberated. Unfortunately, on the 19th of January, the Nazis saw the writing on the wall, and they rounded up all the surviving slave laborers in Monowitz, and they took them on the death march. They took them on a death march, and they went to Gleiwitz. Now, Gleiwitz was another part of Auschwitz. It was another part of Auschwitz camp network. Auschwitz is not just one camp. It's got satellite sites. It's not just the big Auschwitz 1 where you see that horrible sign Arbeit macht frei, and Auschwitz 2, which was Birkenau, which was the killing factory. Of course, you had Auschwitz 3, which was Monowitz, and various other ones. Now, Gleiwitz was another sub-camp of Auschwitz, which was another work camp, but really it was mainly there for fixing of the trains that would roll in and out, delivering Jewish people to their fate. And it was there where they used to fix that. They had an airstrip there, they had roads, they had a machine shop, they had all sorts of things going on where they would keep the prisoners, and they would fix up all the rolling stock and the various cattle cars and trains that they used. And it's a bit further away from Auschwitz 1, Auschwitz 2, and Monowitz, which are much closer together. So they marched the death march down to there. Now, Gleiwitz had already been evacuated and had its own death march, which went to Gross-Rosen. But Gleiwitz at the time was empty, and they marched the Jews to Gleiwitz. Now, there are two accounts. They arrived in Gleiwitz on the 21st of January, 1945. There are two accounts as to when Victor Perez was killed. He was either, according to one account, he was killed just as they entered Gleiwitz. He was unable to continue the march. He was just before he got there. He was unable to continue going, and he was shot on the side of the road. That's the first. That's the first account as what happened. The other account is that he was killed. He was executed on the 22nd of January because him and some other prisoners had found the abandoned Gleiwitz kitchen and found some bread and other things in there, and were distributing it with amongst their fellow inmates, and he was executed for that on the 22nd of January. So there are two opinions, both of which are eyewitness opinions. So therefore, we can't really know what happened to him. And after the war, a couple of movies were made about him. There's one in French, there's an Israeli one as well. Israelis made a movie about him as well. And he was inducted into the Jewish Sports Hall of Fame in 1986. But his memory was really disappeared. Nobody ever talked about him. He never had any children. He doesn't have any surviving family. And he disappeared. He disappeared off out of the consciousness of most of the Jewish people, because boxing itself has disappeared out of the consciousness of most Jewish people. So I decided that I wanted to remember him. And so therefore I undertook to say the Kaddish for him on his yort site. So I say it on both of his yort sites. And of course on Yom HaShoah as well. And to say Yizkor for him when it is time to say Yizkor. So we have his Hebrew name, Masud Chai ben Chaim, and we remember him. But the other thing that we have here in Perth is that the boxing club is named the Maccabi Western Australia Victor Perez Memorial Boxing Club. And we have his picture. His picture is on the t-shirts. His picture is on the boxing trunks. And when the young Jewish boys of Western Australia go into battle, they go and they all know who he was, and they all know what he did, and they all would love to emulate him and be a world champion. But they remember him not just for being a great boxer, they remember him for being a great human being as well. And the fact that he was one of us and that we don't forget him is vitally important, not just for the grand scheme of things, but it's important for us. It's important for us not to forget him, not to forget those who've gone before us. So we do whatever we can to honor his memory. And anyone who comes into our boxing club, we have a full printout of his whole history on the wall. His picture is on the wall. Anyone who comes in, we've had the president of Boxing Western Australia. It was a former Australian Olympic boxing coach. He now knows the whole story. We've drilled it into his head. So it's a great honor to share that story with you. But it's something that we can never forget. It's every single person. I remember that someone once said that Hitler didn't kill 6 million Jews. He killed one Jew 6 million times. And each one of those Jews is important. And many of them we know, and many of them we remember of our own families who sadly perished in the Holocaust. And many names are known, but many people don't have any families, and many families were completely destroyed. So it's up to us, if we can, to memorialize those who may have been forgotten. So that is my little bit that I'm doing to work in that field. We've also been to Yad Vashem to see his name in the books and in the Hall of Memory. And yeah, as I said, we say the Kaddish for him. We light a candle for him in the boxing club on his yacht site, which is always in January. And we mourn the sad loss and the sad loss of greatness. He died. He was murdered at the age of 33. He was 33 years old when he died. So every day we go into training, every day we go into our gym, we know that he was there. 33 is certainly younger than me, even though I may be a very young rabbi. It's still younger than me, and it's a great honor. It's a great honor and a privilege to represent his memory when we run our sessions there in Maccabi, Western Australia. I'm very grateful to Rabbi Elton and the Great Synagogue for having me and giving me the opportunity to tell you this story. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. I'm happy to stay and talk about other things if you want me to. It's all yours, Rabbi.
Thank you so much. That was very fascinating and also very moving. I'll invite people to put their questions about Victor Perez, anything else you'd like to ask Rabbi Lieberman, into the chat. While you are warming up your fingers, maybe just a couple of reflections. I didn't realize actually when I asked Rabbi Lieberman to speak about Victor Perez, that there was probably a closer connection between me and him than I realized. So my grandfather, Solomon Isaac Lewis, after whom our son, Solomon Isaac Elton, is named, was a very enthusiastic amateur boxer in Manchester in the 1930s in Jewish circles. And he later boxed when he was in the RAF, especially in India. When he was stationed in India, he was in competitions and won them in the RAF in India. My grandfather would have been 20 when Victor Perez fought in Manchester in 1932 and gained his title. it seems to me very, very likely that my grandfather was at the fight and saw Perez win. So that must have been marvelous for the Jewish boys of Manchester to see a Jewish boy from about the same age actually, come over from Paris and win and become the world champion. It must have been so exciting and moving for all the guys there. So
and he was very obviously Jewish as well. He had a Magen David on his shorts. He was very proud of it. He wasn't hiding it. And there are a pair of his shorts, I think, in the Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. I think I saw a picture of them. But yeah, he definitely, the pictures I have of him, he's wearing his Magen David proudly on his shorts. So if your grandfather was there, you definitely would have known that he was Jewish.
Maybe as people are warming up their questions, I'll ask them more in general about your rabbinate in Perth. It's an unusual rabbinate these days because there are a few cases probably in the world now, especially outside the Haredi world, where there's really a Rav of a city who comes in and has to deal with kashrut and maybe have an Erev as well, and just deals with all aspects of Jewish life. I was a candidate to be the Rabbi of Basel at the same time I was applying to the Great here in Sydney, and I got the job at the Great first, so I came here before they concluded the process. But it was the same in Basel. You arrive in Basel as a rabbi, suddenly you're responsible for everything from conversions to kashrut to the old age home. It's a very different experience to how it was in Allerton for you in Liverpool. How did you find the transition?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Liverpool itself is a very independent city, shall we say? There's a joke that goes around. They say that someone came to a man from Birmingham and said, what is the second city of England? And he said Birmingham. And he came to a man from Manchester and he said, what's the second city of England? He said Manchester. And they came to a man from Liverpool and they said, what's the second city of England? And he said London. So Liverpool was very independent, so and fiercely independent of the chief rabbi's office and all various other things. So I was doing a lot of things like this, obviously not on the same scale, but in Liverpool. So especially the kashrut, especially the civil stuff. I mean, I ended up being the chaplain to every single official person in Liverpool. I was the high sheriff's chaplain who wore a sword and we had police outriders. It was absolutely wonderful stuff. So I was doing a lot of that stuff already when I was in Liverpool on a smaller scale. But when I came here, the vast scale of what has to be done is unlike anything else. And really, you have to be all things to all men. You have to be a master of all trades, or if not, you have to pretend to be a master of all trades. And be a supreme diplomat dealing with wildly different situations within half an hour of each other. You can be dealing with kashrut situation and then go off to Parliament to talk about a euthanasia bill that's coming through, or and people from all walks of life come and talk to me and ask me things and ask me to deal with things. I've just been asked, you'll like this, I've just been asked whether I am opposed to the city of Perth having a Christmas celebration and changing, what my opinion is about them changing it to a multicultural celebration. And I told them I think it's a bad idea and I don't think they should do it. They said, well, would you want us to do a Hanukkah celebration? I said, yes, but I wouldn't want you to make it multicultural. I want you to be true to the origins and the state of Hanukkah. So these are the type of things I have to do. And then I have to go and fix the Erev, which has gone down in a storm, and explain to a pool mechanic why he can't pump all of the water out of the mikveh. And when because we had a bit of an algae problem in the rainwater mikveh, and we had to deal with that. And I have to, lots of varied things. That conversation was interesting. And I told him after he'd finished and we'd poured 60 liters of chlorine in the rainwater mikveh. And I told him that by a long way, this is not the weirdest thing that we do.
It's interesting because, those of us who have smicha, often the smicha itself, the content of the smicha itself is not the most useful part of our rabbinate. So we might give shiurim in Chumash or in Gemara or whatever, but the actual content of a smicha, which is kashrut, maybe mikvah ot, this is material we cover to show our abilities in learning and therefore worthy of smicha. But then the details of salting get rather left behind as we embark on the practical communal rabbinate, and we leave that sort of specialist stuff to somebody else. But with you must have to review all your smicha notes.
Yeah, to be honest, the salting, I actually did salting. I did malicha in smicha. We did it, and we had to go to the abattoir to learn how to do it properly. So yeah, it was nice to get back onto the horse for that. But it's really, I agree. They should be really teaching us other rabbis other things. Whether it's better that they don't learn it and they're able to just gain the experience like you and I have done is interesting. But yes, certainly, lots of different things have come up. One of the other things that I have is my degrees, my university degrees in psychology. When I did practice a bit as a child psychologist while I was in Liverpool, but that's been very useful. And I wouldn't know how that I would be able to cope without that.
Especially in these times when self-care is so important.
Especially during COVID times when people are really struggling.
But also the rabbi looking after himself.
Yeah, that's what I'm not very good at.
That's what the boxing's for.
Yeah. It is true. We do have to look after ourselves, and yeah, my wife keeps telling me.
I'll just give those who are with us another minute or two to any questions. Otherwise, I think we'll sign off. But one thing about Perth is that the rabbis last a long time and you live a long time. So I hope that also applies to you. Please
God, I hope so. Well, I'm the fifth rabbi. I'm the fifth rabbi of the Perth Hebrew congregation since 1892. I'm the fifth rabbi. I have the unique experience of being a rabbi of a shul with two predecessors still lurking in the pews. One of which is Rabbi Dr. Sholem Coleman, who is 102 years old and is still driving and is about to buy another new car. That he bought his last car when he was 97 with an extended warranty. And now he wants another new car because he wants one with an electric boot. He's seen that feature and he thinks that it would be nice to have. So he's about to buy another. He's unstoppable. That's of course Rabbi David Freilich, a native of Sydney, former member of the, maybe current member of the Great Synagogue.
A renewed member of the Great Synagogue.
Certainly in his youth he was a member of the Great Synagogue, but yeah, he's also still around as well. And so yeah, I'm the fifth rabbi in the history of the Perth Hebrew congregation. It's a very daunting responsibility and strange idea that I may be here forever.
Well, we'll see how you're doing in 2050. See how you're jogging along.
I'm retiring in 2052. I've told them
that. Good. We have one question. What is the size of the PHC?
PHC is somewhere around 1,000. If you count everyone, children, the children as well. So souls, we count 1,000 souls. Yeah. We like to count souls. But Perth itself, who knows how big Perth it is when it comes to Jewish people. I've heard 5,000, I've heard 10,000, I've heard everything in between. There are a lot of Israelis here. We have a lot of South Africans here as well. We have a lot of Australians here and a lot of English people. So it's a very interesting community, very old community, and it's a good community. It's really a fabulous place to be. And if you haven't been to visit us in WA, when Comrade McGowan opens up the borders, then you will always be welcome to come and visit us and to enjoy our wonderful Western Australian lifestyle and our wonderful place. I know that you were booked in to come and see us, Rabbi Elton, but that didn't go through, unfortunately. So.
Please God, after lockdown, I should be. I'll need a break, put it that way. So
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'll take it.
Sure. And
If I
also,
get-
when
from
you
the
do,
winery to
it'll be
Perth.
good together.
If I get from the winery to Perth, that'll also be a great achievement. I want to thank Rabbi Lieberman very, very much. Really fascinating. So enjoyed it so much. Very moved by the account. Thank everyone for joining us.